So you hit 60 a while back and you've still not got your epic mount, and you decided to install this TSM thing that you've heard so much about to get rich and get that mount sorted out before it starts to become a bit farcical how long you've been waiting for it. And you've gone and got it set up and you've given it a go and you've found that you're getting an awful lot of failed auctions. Now, failed auctions are inevitable, but there are certainly things that you can do to improve your odds of getting sales. You don't have to have a complete mailbox of failed auctions every time. And today we're going to be looking at one of the key ways in which people often fail with regards to getting those sales, and that is your auctioning operations on TSM. So let's dive in. So first things first, you may be so new at this that you have not actually created an operation for yourself and you are using the default auctioning operation. Now, the default auctioning operation is really not as bad as a default setting on a lot of things often are, but it's not what you want to be using. So if that is the case you find yourself in, if you are that new to this, that is the operation you are using, the first piece of advice that I will give you is that you are going to want to create your own auctioning operations. And then it is a simple case of going onto your operations, selecting auctioning and clicking the little button for a new operation. From there you can follow all the rest of the steps that we're going to talk about in this video. And how we're going to go about doing this is pretty much as if you were setting up a new operation. We're going to pop up all of the different options on the screen that you will want to be deciding upon what you want to set them at, as this is an individual based decision that you have to make. So we'll be going through each potential option and why you may want to pick any given outcome for that particular field. So the first thing we're going to talk about is posting settings. Now I'm going to throw them up on the screen for you here, and these are your most basic tools when it comes to the settings at which you want your auctions to obey. Now we're going to go through these one by one. We're not going to cover absolutely every setting for all of these because some of them aren't as important as others, so for this beginner's guide we are going to be going over the ones that are going to seriously impact your potential sales. So the first one up is that we are going to be talking about auction duration. Now auction duration, as you can see on here, has three different settings: 2 hours, 8 hours and 24 hours. Now this is probably the setting that most people get wrong most often, and that is because people simply are lazy, in the short and simple of it. Now, when it comes to picking which of these you want to use, it is very subjective on mostly the two factors being what you're selling and what time frame and effort levels you're willing to put in yourself individually. Now, let's give you some examples here. You are looking to sell some crafting materials that are very fast selling, and you are on patch day where there's huge demand for these crafting materials that didn't exist 2 days ago. Now you don't need to put these on for a 24-hour period because they're going to shift, and putting them on for 24 hours is actually going to harm your profits because you will be paying more in deposit fees than you would if you were to put them on for simply putting them on for 2 hours. Now, when it comes to deposit fees, there's a lot of misconception here. It costs money to place an item on the auction house, but this deposit fee is proportional for the length of time that you are posting your auction, i.e. if you are posting an 8-hour auction, your posting fee is 4 times higher than posting it for 2 hours. Now, this just means that you're paying per hour that you are posting it for, so it is not cheaper to post at 2 hours or at 24 hours if your auction is going to be on for 24 hours in total. What is the difference, however, is if your auction is definitely going to be on for less than 24 hours, you don't want to put it up for 24 hours because you're just paying those fees up front to then have it only be up for 1 hour anyway before it sells. On the other factor that can dictate whether or not you want to be setting a short or long timer for your sales is going to be you yourself. Now, currently, on the days when I'm playing and doing my auctions, I generally have the most of the day to be able to sort of micromanage my auction house. So I use the 2-hour posting system, and this gives me the maximum capacity to be able to go and collect my expired auctions and repost them. If the prices have changed or anything like that, I'll be able to adapt to that. But on other days, I simply don't have the time to post my auctions at all. So if I can find 5 minutes to post my auctions, I'm much better off on those days putting them up for 24 hours rather than the 2, because if I put them up for 2 hours later, I'm not going to be able to get back to that mailbox. So if you are, let's say for example, quite a busy person and you work 9 to 5 and you're putting your auctions up right before you go to work, you'll only be doing an 8-hour day at work. Putting them up for 8 hours seems pretty logical, because then they'll be expiring roughly around the time you're setting off to come back home, and it minimises the amount of time that items are sat in your mailbox rather than on the auction house, because of course they don't sell while they're in your mailbox. So those are the 2 big factors you want to consider when dictating to your operations the length of time that you want to post your auctions for. Now next up we have a relatively simple one by comparison, and that is the maximum number of items that we are looking to post to the auction house, as well as the stack size that we are looking to post those items in. Now this one's very important as well, but is quite a bit more simple to understand and something that people don't mess up quite as often, but it is worth mentioning. And that is that if you are selling items that are, let's say for example, really high value, chances are you're not going to shift lots of them. You don't see a lot of Ferraris being driven around because not everyone has the money for them, and even the people that do buy one. Generally it's something that's bought off like that. By comparison, if you are selling herbs, that's the equivalent of a real life loaf of bread, and you're going to shift lots of them, and it's not uncommon for people to buy 2, 3, 4 at a time, and therefore you're going to want to have a bigger amount posted to the auction house. Now when it comes to flipping groups that I've mentioned in previous videos, if you're selling really high value BOE purples, I tend not to post more than 1 at a time. Maybe at a push I'd put 2 if it's something like a pair of weapons that you're going to be trying to sell off to one person who's looking to twink, something like that, but never any higher than that. And of course, with it being items that are equipment, you can only post them in stacks of 1. If however I'm selling consumables or reagents or something like that, then I'm going to be selling them in stacks of 20, and that's dictated by the stack size here. Now this one's fairly simple to understand. The only thing that's ever catches people off guard is this little toggle that you see, which is allowing partial stacks. That's just saying that if you were to be selling a stack of 20 of something but you only have 17, it's whether or not you want it to post to 17 or keep it in the bag until you get your 20. Now that can affect sales, because a lot of people will only buy items in neat stacks, so that's 5s, 10s and 20s, because, well, people are weird. I never got that myself, but people just simply want to buy things in 5s, 10s and 20s for nice neat looking things in their bag, understanding how many they've got. Yeah, so do bear that in mind, it's an option that is up to you. Now the last setting that we're going to discuss here is that we are going to talk about max expirations. Now there's a very good chance that if you're new to TSM, you're building your own groups. Now these could be just simply making a group of items that you got while you're leveling that you're not overly familiar with, some greens, or just something that you're not quite sure what the use of, what profession makes the most use out of it, and therefore you're not entirely sure whether it's going to be worth selling or not. Just because something has a decent market value does not necessarily mean that it's worth selling, so you decided to give it a go. Now that's great and it's probably the best practice. However, there is a point where you do have to accept defeat with certain items, and that's where this setting comes in. All this is going to do is it's going to stop posting an item once it's reached a certain amount of failures on the auction house to sell. So let's say you're selling a green and you're putting it up for 24 hours at a time, and you've set this setting to 5. After 5 postings, however long in real life that takes you to post it 5 times, if it hasn't sold, it's simply not going to post it to the auction house again, and then it's going to save you on those posting fees, and obviously then at that point it's up to you to decide what you want to do with that item. Generally speaking, in the example that I gave, I'd probably disenchant it or just vendor it at that point. So that's the final setting. Now that's not us done with our operation, however. We've still got the meat and potatoes to go, unfortunately. So now this is where things get a little bit complicated, and this is with regards to price settings. So I'm going to pop these up on the screen for you here. And now the lucky thing is that a lot of this is quite simple, so we're going to go over the simple stuff first rather than doing it in order, and then we'll get on to the big chunky bit that we see there in the middle. Now, when it comes to our top two options here, our set bid as percentage of buyout and undercut amount, I highly recommend keeping your undercut amount at 1 copper. All you're going to do if you were to change that is piss off the other people who use your auction house. There is no reason to set this any more than 1 copper. 1 copper is going to make you the cheapest and therefore the first to sell, because that's what people look for. And it is also not going to tank the market value of an item. If you set this to be 1 gold that you undercut somebody by, not only are you going to have problems with regards to robbing yourself and everybody else, and irritating everybody else, but you're also potentially going to have post problems if it comes to a point where you're posting an item that doesn't sell for a gold, for example. Now, setting bid as a percentage of buyout, personally I like to keep this at 100%, which is the default. This just means that the price that I'm posting at is the price that I'm going to get, and it just helps to prevent any sort of issues with regards to trying to put this lower to get people to entice them into bidding and then end up selling an item for considerably less than it's worth, which can happen with regards to having low market values that are just anomalous. So I'd keep that just the same. Now in our screenshot here, we are discussing the minimum price. That's what's showing on the screen. However, there is one of these boxes and one of these last options for all of the minimum price, the normal price, and the maximum price. Now, we're going to go with the example of the minimum price here, but the same sort of rules apply for dictating for the others, and that is that one of them is going to dictate what you want to do when the item is below minimum, or alternatively above maximum price. Now, when below minimum, personally, I don't like to post my items, because your options would be either to post your items at minimum, in which case you're putting up your auctions, putting them on at a price that is higher than what someone else has got them on at, and essentially, unless all of it sells or theirs expire, you're not going to be the one that sells, and you're just wasting those fees to post your auctions. If you want to post at normal price or post at max price, those are the other options as well, but obviously that's even worse than posting at your minimum. When it comes to above maximum price, you do have some fluctuation that you can do. You can post at maximum price. By default, I believe it sets to post at normal price, which is also a valid option, because it means that if the prices are incredibly high or there simply isn't anything present, then there is still a chance that you can get that sale. And if you went for the maximum price, you're going to optimize the amount of gold that you can get. You can take advantage of having all of the stock. However, you are potentially going to overprice yourself to a point where no one's going to buy it, even though you're the only one. So personally, I do set at maximum price when it is over maximum price. However, I just make sure that my maximum prices are reasonable, and that is what we're going to discuss next. Now, the last setting that you see here is the prices themselves. Now, this is the most important thing that can dictate whether you have an item that sells or not. And you have one of these to set a price for minimum, maximum, and normal price. And it can be quite confusing. So I'm actually going to pop up on the screen for you now a list of all the different price sources that you can use when dictating what prices you want to use in your own TSM operations. Now, I hope you're ready for it, because here it is. Now, this is quite a lot of information that you could potentially be faced with, that makes it quite apparent why people often fail with regards to getting this right. Now, what I want to make clear is, first off the bat, my little point is that these are all of the different price sources available to you as standard in TSM on the retail version of WoW. To my understanding, there are some of these that aren't currently working in Classic. However, I'm sure they'll be getting there soon, and the overwhelming majority do still work. But one thing that I do want to make clear is one of my sort of golden rules that I like to use while setting my prices, is that I want to keep these as simple as possible. So there is a few that stand out as ones that I am highly willing to use, and a few that I am not. My default is DB market. Now, this is going to take a market value of any given item, averaged out across all the postings, but only on your realm, and only for the last 14 days. Now, that gets you a pretty reasonable understanding of what a price should be, and it makes things really simple and prevents you from making any really complicated formulas that would result in setting prices that are going to rob you, or prices that are simply never going to sell. If you set a normal price for an item as being 100% of market value for your server, then you are going to find that that is going to, of course, make a very standard price, that people would be willing to pay. Now, alternatively, there are other viable options on here, particularly if you're setting up groups to sell that were things that you have crafted for yourself. Of course, you can use things like the crafting cost, or if you are creating an item with a profession that is using primarily materials that were bought from a vendor, you can use things like the vendor buy price. But the more that you complicate these things, the more difficult it becomes. I think a better way of looking at it is more which of these that you should avoid. Now, this is highly subjective and something that I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with me with. If you do, feel free to leave your disagreements down in the comments below, and I will sort of attempt to go through all of them and debate with you as to why I feel the way that I do, but hopefully that will be apparent from the rest of this video. Now, what I like to avoid is anything that is global or regional. Now, these are potentially useful in the retail version of the game, but in Classic, they really aren't. There is no interaction between realms whatsoever, and when it comes to things like the region for dictating the prices of items, there is a use for it, just simply not in your price settings. Now, for example, if you want to check the region price of an item on a tooltip to see if your market value is reasonable and comparative, you can do that. And this is a great tool to have. For example, if you bring up a green item that you've got in your bag and it is displaying that the market value is 5 gold and you're not quite sure if the item actually really is worth that, and then you notice that the regional sale value is actually about 20 silver, then you'll be able to understand that that market value has been manipulated somehow by somebody posting the auction too extreme or something like that, and it's something that you're going to then be able to adapt to. So while it does have a place, it does not have a place in my actual price settings, simply in what I like to do for myself as opposed to automation. So when it comes to my own settings that I personally like to use, I pretty much use the DB market value for absolutely all of my groups that I use. So I tend to set my minimum prices to be around the 70 to 85% of market value mark, depending on whether I've crafted the item for myself and I may have done it on the cheap, or whether it's going to be a particularly slow shifting item or a particularly high value item. If an item is particularly high value, I tend to try and get my minimum price to be as high as possible because I don't want to rob myself of quite a large profit margin. And similarly on that front, if it's a crafted item that I have made for relatively cheap, I am more willing to take a lower profit margin than if it was something that I had paid for myself. My normal price tends to be 100% market value because the only times it's going to use my normal price is simply when there's nothing really around, or if prices have been drawn particularly ludicrous, and at that point I think it's the best balance of getting value for your item without actually affecting your sale rate by being too greedy. When it comes to max value prices, I tend to have this set in a way so that if it is another high value item, I don't push my luck too much. I'll generally set it to 110, maybe 120% of market value to try and ensure that I can sort of get the benefit of being the only person on the market, but without pushing myself to the point where I'm never going to sell an item. Maybe with regards to really low value items, like some low level herbs and mining ores and the such, I would be willing to push my luck a little bit further, because at the end of the day, people are more likely to pay an extra 5 silver if that's the difference of the 50% of market value than they are to pay an extra 50 gold. But that's going to about wrap it up for this video, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and more importantly, I do hope that you found it useful. If you did find it useful or enjoyable, please do let me know down in the comments below, and if you'd like to keep up to date with my next videos or any future releases, please do consider subscribing to the channel. But for now, guys, that's going to about do it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Later.